Let us continue our discussions after terminology. As we discuss some basic terminologies like N, L, average K, K in, K out, we will give more formalism to it with help of some examples and try to understand what is adjacency matrix, what is degree distribution, and in next lecture we will talk about clustering coefficients. So based on our discussion so far, you can easily figure out now that the different type of graphs exist in real world, or I should use word networks when I'm talking about real world systems. So one is an indirected network where flow is bidirectional. Example I already gave is in a relationship network. You are talking to somebody, somebody is talking to you, so direction does not matter. Co-worker network, if I am working with you, that means you are also working with me, and hence the direction does not matter, and so on. Similarly, we have some directed graphs or directed networks where direction of flow is important. For example, if I'm making a phone call to you, that means that has originated from me and edge or link would be terminating at you. Similarly, prey-predator network, if tiger eats deer, that means there is a directional relationship because deer is not eating tiger and not deriving its energy from tiger, and so on. Similarly, there are some other aspects that we need to be mindful of where we have to account for strengths, or what is the weight associated with each edge. For example, multiple trains running between station A and B, and that has to be accounted for, and we study them under the umbrella of weighted network, which would be a special topic of discussion in our journal clubs. However, to begin with, our initial discussions will focus on undirected graphs, and we will see that how these concepts also generalize to directed graph wherever applicable. And once you get a good hold of unweighted undirected graphs, you would find learning other type of networks and graphs would be much easier. Okay, so let us get started with degree. Here I have drawn a small 4-degree node, uh, small network with 4 nodes, and question is that in this particular network where n is equal to 4 and L equal to 3, if I ask you that if direction of interaction does not matter, what is the average degree of a network? So we are interested in K. So one simple way is that you go to each node and say that this particular node has 1 degree, this node has degree of 1, and this node also has a degree of 1, and the central node has a degree of 3 divided by total number of nodes that are present. So this become 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 divided by 4. So on an average, the K average for this network is 3 by 2. Another thing, if you notice here, is that in this case, each edge is contributing towards degree of 2 nodes. That is, if you focus on this particular edge, this is also assigning degree 1 to this node and 1 degree to this node. That means we can also say that each edge is responsible for 2 degrees, and hence if we can count number of links, if we can or edge, if we can count number of nodes, average degree of this particular network can be worked out easily as 2 times number of links here are 3 and n equal to 4, and this would be 3 by 2. You may notice that I am using word edges and links interchangeably because now we are describing a network as a graph, and when we go to graph, it's a graph, we often follow the notation of vertices and edges, but from now on we can use these words interchangeably, so don't get confused whether we are talking about networks and graphs. Specifically in this chapter we are doing sort of a crash course on graph theory. All right, now let's move to the second question, that a directed network with n nodes has l number of links. Now this is a directed graph, so let us say that our directed graph or directed network looks something like this. And now the question remains same, that what is the average in degree and out degree. As you can imagine, in degree is what is the average degrees that are entering into a particular node, and similarly what is the average degrees that are leaving from the node. So here if we are interested in K in, what we have to do, we have to see that for this particular node there is no link or edge that is entering this node, so 0. Similarly 0, here one node is entering, and here two nodes are entering, two links are entering, divided by 4, so this becomes 3 by 4. Similarly, if you look at K out, from this particular node one edge is leaving, so this is equal to 1. From this edge, from this node one edge is leaving, from this node one edge is leaving, and from this node nothing is leaving, so this would be 0 divided by 4. So again this becomes 3 by 4. As you can imagine, whatever is leaving has to terminate somewhere in the graph. So for directed graph, k in would always be equal to k out, and that can be simply written as L upon N. Here each edge or link is contributing only once towards degree of the nodes that it is joining, because it can either be leaving or it can be joining or entering a given node. Hence k in equal to k out equal to number of links divided by n. So these topological measures of networks would be very important when we go towards quantification of real world networks. Hence it is my humble request that you should go through these concepts very thoroughly, does not matter how small they are. Okay, let us move to next very important measure of network topology, what we call as degree distribution. Here let us plot this network. If we have this small network again that we are using in previous cases also, so I'll just take one instant of it. This particular node has degree of 1, this node has degree of 1, this node has degree of 3, and this node has degree of 1. Now if I have to draw the histogram of this degree distribution, it would look like if I k on x-axis and if I have pk on y-axis and I start with k equal to 1. The question that I am asking is that if I randomly select a node from this network, what is the probability of finding a node with degree equal to 1? As you can see, there are 2 nodes of degree equal to 1 out of 4 nodes. Hence, if I say that probability of finding a node with degree equal to 1 is equal to number of nodes that have degree equal to 1 divided by total number of nodes. Here n1 is equal to 2 because 2 nodes have degree equal to, in fact 3 nodes have degree equal to 1, and divided by 4. So I can say that probability of finding a node with degree equal to 1 in this case would be 3 by 4. Now if I move to 2, there is no node in this network which has degree exactly equal to 2. Hence probability of finding that node is equal to 0 in a given graph or network. Now if I move to 3, you would see that one node out of 4 has probability of having degree equal to 3. So the probability of that is 1 by 4. Now if somebody asks you, by looking at this degree distribution, can you tell us what is the average degree of this network? From the mathematical review class, we learned that average degree is equal to expectation of degree, and it can be obtained by summing from k equal to 0 to infinity k pk, and here only we would consider non-zero terms, that is we can take k equal to 1, its probability of occurrence is equal to 3 by 4, and k is equal to 2 has no existence, k equal to 3 has one existence with probability 1 by 4. Hence this would become 3 by 4 plus 3 by 4, which is equal to 6 by 4 or 3 by 2, which is exactly same from the relationship that we derived in last slide. So the point is, when we go to real world systems, rather than dealing with 4 nodes, we would be dealing with 4 million nodes, and these degree distributions will carry essential characteristics or signatures of different real world networks. Hence this forms one of the cornerstone of network topology. If you look at some of the real world networks now, most of these real world networks, they are characterized in terms of n, l, and average k. And if you see here, from internet to protein interactions, number of nodes range all the way from a few thousands to few hundred thousands, and the average degree, that is on an average each node is connected to from 2 to all the way from 2 to 6 other nodes. And this quickly gives you sort of a mental map or insights into that how dense this network is, how big this network is, what would be the value of this network, and so on. And we will be using these examples of internet, www, power grid, email, and so on repeatedly throughout our courses. But we will also look into that how similar various systems are to these characteristics network that would be dealing with. Now coming to real world networks, how their degree distribution looks like. Typically, most of the systems that we see around, they have something called as hubs. So hubs are those nodes in a network which have exceptionally large number of connections. Even in social networks, you can imagine that these hubs could be politicians. These and there would be small, very large number of other nodes that have either one or two connections to other nodes. So if you look at the degree distribution of real world system, they follow something like this. If we have k here and we have pk here, finding the node with less number of degrees would be very high, and as we go towards higher values of k or large number of degrees, number of hubs keep on decreasing at rapid rate. And if we plot this relationship on log scale, we see a typical power law behavior that we will discuss extensively in chapter 4, which looks linear on log scale. And we will talk about properties of such systems in more detail when we talk about scale free network. But this should give you an insight that there are certain hubs that control the entire network. Does not matter what how small their number is, but the number of connections that they have to other nodes is exceptionally higher, and this signature is universal across many real world systems that I showed in last slide and that we are going to discuss in subsequent chapters. Now, talking about how we are going to deal with these networks and graphs and computers simultaneously, because computer is not going to understand the photograph of these graphs. So what we will do, we will learn something called as adjacency matrix. So let us consider that we have a small 4 node network with 1, 2, 3 and 4, again same nodes, and we want to give a mathematical we want to describe this graph using a mathematical entity called as matrix, and each element of this matrix would represent connection from j to I. That is, if j is connected to I, we will assign that aij equal to 1, and if j is not connected to I, we will say that it is equal to 0. Again, slow down and listen this carefully. We are not saying connection from I to j. We are saying that if j is connected to I, only then we are going to assign it to 1 and otherwise 0. It would be immaterial in case of undirected graph, but when we are talking about directionals in edges and links, this j to I property would become very important. So for this small network, let us try to look into the adjacency matrix, that how it looks like. So I will make some space here, and let us say that we have this matrix 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 are my node IDs. If 1 connects to 1, of course not. Does 2 connects to 1? As we are saying that this would be j and this would be I, and we will be reading 2 connects to 1. Yes, it connects because direction does not matter. Does 3 connects to 1? Yes, it does. Does 4 connects to 1? Yes, it does. Coming to 2, does 2 connects to 1? Yes. Does 2 connect to 3? Of course not. Does 2 connect to 2? No. Does 2 connect to 4? No. Similarly, for node 3, yes, 1 connects to 3, and 2 connects to 3, no. 3 connects to 3, no. 3 connects to 4, no. For node 4, yes, 4 is 1 is connected to 4, 1, and all other of these would be 0. So this is a typical adjacency matrix of our network or graph of size 4. One thing you can notice is that if our graph is undirected, this particular adjacency matrix is going to be symmetrical. And I will introduce another term that we will discuss in more detail. It is also going to be positive definite, and we will talk about these terms later on, and they will form cornerstone of our discussions when we will go to discussion of page rank centralities or eigenvalue centralities in the context of network. Now, another question for you: if I add some directions here and using the same notation, j connects to I equal to 1, j does not connect to I equal to 0, can you find the adjacency matrix of this particular network? In case you face any problems, please write down your comment in the comment section. So moving our discussions to sparsity of real world networks. If you see three typical examples from the table that I showed, we had a network of World Wide Web. We have a co-authorship network. Co-authorship network means that if I have written a paper or a research article with another scientist, I would consider there is a direct edge between us, and this edge is going to be undirected, because if I have written paper with you, that means you have also written a paper with me. Similarly, movie actors, if I'm a film star and I have worked with somebody in a movie, that means that particular guy or gal has also worked with me in the movie, and that would give rise to a network of interactions of movie actors, or similarly similarly authorship network. We have been talking about www, that is, if one web page connects to another, we say that they are connected by an edge. And we also talked about the internet, where two routers are interacting, and so we can impose these network entities on many real world systems. However, the interesting point that we are going to derive here is that if you look at how many nodes are there, how many links are there, although these looks like big number, right? Like 10 to the power 6, 10 to the power 5, 10 to the power 6, and this is 10 to the power 13, 10 to the power 10, and so on. The question that remains here is that these networks, despite of such a large number of links that you see, are sparse. And this is one of the most important properties of real world system. So we'll try to understand what this sparsity means. Now consider that you have n nodes in a network. If you have to join all these nodes by an edge, the maximum number of edges that are possible would be equal to n choose 2. That is, you can take two nodes and out of n and join them with an edge, and you can do that in nc2 possible ways, and this would be n into n minus 1 upon 2, because this would be n factorial upon 2 factorial into n minus 2 factorial, which simplifies to this. Now, although real number of links that are observed in this network are 1.4 into 10 to the power 6, and links possible by this formulae and using this number of edges is approximately 10 to the power 12. And you can clearly see that if you calculate this as the percentage density of network, this is going to be a very, very, very small number, and that's where we say that most of the real world networks are sparse. What does that mean in the context of adjacency matrix? That if you draw its adjacency matrix, you will see that out of n cross n elements, only a few, or sometimes just a 0.001% of those adjacency matrices would have ones in those places, another 99% of those points would be zeros. That would mean that you are storing a lot of zeros and consuming a lot of memory spaces inefficiently, and hence adjacency matrix may not be a best representation of graphs or networks. And we will talk about what are the other ways to store these graphs or networks into computers when we will go to Python programming. So one thing is for sure, that these adjacency matrices are sparse, and we can always save them as sparse adjacency matrices to save some space on our computer. Now this is a real world adjacency matrix of a real world network, which is a protein-protein interaction network, which has around 2000 nodes. And you see that if this is the box where you have to put dots, these dots are scarce. They are distant apart from each other, and you see there is a lot of white space in the box that I have drawn, highlighting that if you visualize a real world network in form of a matrix, it is going to be sparse with lots of zeros. Now we have been talking about directed graph, undirected graph. We also talked a bit about weighted networks. Let me introduce you to another class of networks or graphs that we call as bipartite networks. Now what happens in bipartite networks is that you have two set of nodes, and these, let us say this is u and this is v, and no element in u interact directly with each other, and they only interact with the elements in v. One example of bipartite network is a prey predator network. That is, you are plotting the food habits of various species that exist in a forest area. So you have a tiger, you have, let us say, leopard, and you have crocodile, and so on, and you can assume that these carnivorous animals, they are afraid of each other, and hence they are not going to eat themselves. Then you have deer, you have sambar, you have black buck, and so on. Now you can see that tiger is going to eat deer, leopard is going to eat deer, and crocodile is also going to eat deer. Tiger is also going to eat sambar, leopard is going to eat sambar, and so on. Let us say crocodile doesn't like black buck for some reasons. I don't know whether those reasons are legal or not, but let us say that crocodile would not eat black buck anytime. So what you can see here is that tiger and leopard, although they are not directly interacting with each other, you can say that they are connected to each other because of the virtue of the common predator that they have. Similarly, we have prey here, and hence we call this as the bipartite network. That is, within two networks, we have two disjoint sets U and V. That is, no element in U is interacting with each other directly, but they are interacting with each other through V. Another excellent example of bipartite examples are food networks. That is, you have some recipe in which some ingredients go, and these ingredients may have some common flavor because they may have same underlying chemicals that impart them distinct taste. For example, here you see that we have taken some examples from a research article written by Ahn et al. In 2011, where they studied the various ingredients and what imparts them flavors, or what kind of chemicals give them distinct flavors, and from there they mapped that what is present in white wine, what is present in mozzarella, what olive oil has in terms of its chemical composition, and based on that they designed a bipartite network of food where U represents various ingredients and V represents what are the flavors that are present in a given or what are the chemicals that are present in various ingredients. Now, to study these bipartite networks, these are called as bipartite because there are two parts, part 1, part 2, and hence bipartite. They are of course networks because there are certain nodes and certain interactions that are happening, and if there are multiple flavors that are shared by two compounds, for example, if you look at garlic and olive oil, you would see that they may have something in common, but those interactions are limited. However, if you look at white wine and Parmesan cheese, you see that many of these chemicals are found in white wine as well as Parmesan, and hence the thickness of edge would denote how many common attributes do they really share. Now, to study these bipartite networks, we typically deal with the projections of these graphs. We'll come back to this example on plant pollinators later on when we go to detailed discussions on bipartite network analysis. So if you look at these bipartite networks, what we do is that we try to write nodes of one type, that is, this is U and this is V in two different colors, and we take the projections. That is, since A is connected to 1 and B is also connected to 1, in a projected network, we can say that A is connected to B. Similarly, since B is connected to 2 and B is connected to 3, that means 2 and 3 can interact with each other through B. Hence, we can say that 2 and 3 are directly connected to each other. Similarly, if you look at A and 1, since A connects to 1 and C connects to 1 and B connects to 2, you can say that B and C, they can always interact through one, and hence there can be a direct edge that can be placed. Similarly, B and A we have already discussed, and A and D. A and D does not have any common member in blue colored nodes, which we are saying as N as common, and hence we cannot place a link directly between them in the projection. So if you go through this particular example, it will give you clarity that how these projections can be carved out of bipartite networks. Along the lines of bipartite network, we also have something called as a tripartite network. That is, we have three layers of interactions that are happening. That is, in addition to ingredients, we can also have some food. That is, let us say chicken masala or some Western cuisine. They may have some ingredients that are in common, and those ingredients in turn can have some flavor compounds that have some commonality, and that would become tripartite network. That is, in addition to UV, we would also have a layer of W, which is denoted by, let us say, Roman letter 1, 2, 3, 4, and they are interacting with each other. That is, let us say chicken masala uses garlic. Similarly, garlic pizza also uses garlic, and hence there would be some commonality in terms of ingredients that they will have. This is going to be ingredient, this is going to be flavor, and this is going to be name of the dish. And these kind of bipartite networks and their projections make our life easier when we deal with some of these real world systems which we cannot express as unipartite networks or simple graphs. Now this brings to discussion on something called as network path. We have already talked about degree distribution. Now we are going to talk about pathology or network path, and finally we will talk about clustering coefficients in next lecture. And you can see that these three would form pillars of network topology. Okay, so what this network path is? So network path is an ordered collection of n plus 1 nodes and n links that tell us that if you have go from one node to another node, what is the path you can take. For example, if I am interested to write the network path between 1 and 6, I can see that I can reach from 1 to 6 going via 2, from 2 to 4, and 4 to 6. So 1 to 2, 2 to 4, and 4 to 6. The reason we are saying that this is an ordered collection, because this implicitly means that from 1 we are hopping to 2, from 2 we are hopping to 4, and from 4 we are hopping to 6. So there are also other paths to reach 6 which may not be necessarily be the shortest, but you can see that from 1 you can go to 2, from 2 you can go to 5, from 5 you can go to 7, from 7 you can go to 4, and from 4 you can go to 6. So again, that would be another possibility that for going from 1 to 6, you can go from 1 to 2, 2 to 5, 5 to 7, 7 to 4, and finally 4 to 6. You see that here we have to cross 3 links or edges, and 4 nodes came into our way. That's why we say that it's an ordered collection of n plus 1 nodes and n links. Similarly here we take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 links, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 nodes, again establishing a fact that from definition perspective we are correct. So if somebody tells us what is the network path, we can easily tell by looking at that particular vector that how we can go from one node to another. Now why this network path is so important? Because we often encounter the problem of finding the shortest path or path that would take from one node to another in minimum number of hops. We will also deal with the costs associated with traversing a particular link. Imagine that this network represents a railroad network, that you want to go from city A to city B in the shortest possible path. And that's where network science help us in planning and designing the topology that would minimize the distance that we have to traverse throughout the network if we are designing any transportation or communication system. Hence, understanding basics of network distance is very important. Now, let us look at another example, what we mean by network distance. Whenever we use the word path, we are talking about we can go from node A to node B by going in a continuous fashion from one node to another and so on. But when we talk about network distance, we are talking about the shortest path that we would take from going from node A to node B. For example, in previous case, we saw that from 1 to 7, we can go via 3 links, or we can also go via 5 links, and hence network distance would be the shortest path that we can take from 1 to 6, which is shown in red in this case. Now, in case of directed graph, these shortest path should be along the direction of the arrows. So for example, if I put some arrows here in orange color, let us say this is an arrow, this is an arrow, and so on, and this arrow comes like this. Now if somebody asks me that in this directed graph, what would be the shortest path, what would be the network distance from 1 to 6, I would say that I can go from 1 to 2 in a direction of arrow, from 2 to 4 I can go, but there is no way I can go from 4 to 6. In fact, there is no way I can reach from 1 to 6 using any of these paths, nor via 4, neither via 7, because nor 4 is connected to 6, nor 7 is connected to 6 in the direction of arrow. Hence, this path does not exist, or we have a null path. And we generally say that if two nodes are not connected with each other, the distance between them tends to infinity, because you cannot go from one particular point to another point. Also, this is an example of disconnected directed graph, because you can clearly see that you cannot go from 1 to 6, and hence no direction, no connectedness exists in this particular network. We will talk about connectedness and clustering coefficient in next lecture, and then things would become more clear what this connectedness means. Now, another question arises. We are interested to find number of paths of certain length between a pair of nodes, and how we can use adjacency matrix to achieve that. Now, if you remember that adjacency matrix would have all zeros and ones. So we will have some nodes here, A, B, C, A, B, C. I am considering a three network, triangle, which is a complete graph in this case. So A to A0, 0, 0, A to B1, A to C1, B to A1, B to C1. I can say this A, B, C, C to A also 1, C to B equal to 1. This is a symmetric complete graph. As you can see, this is a complete graph because we have n into n minus 1 divided by 2 number of links present in this network. Now you can clearly see that what are the total number of shortest paths that exist from A to B. Answer is clearly whatever is the number indicated here is the number of shortest path between A to B. Similarly, from B to A, we have one short path. From B to C, we have one shortest path, and so on. So path of length 1 can be directly discovered from, or the number of paths of length 1 can be directly discovered from adjacency matrix. Now coming to paths of length 2 or paths of length n, it becomes little tricky. So let us try to look at how many paths of length 2 would exist. So what by definition, path of length 2 means that you want to go from A to C by taking a path of length 2. That means you will go from A to B and B to C. Also, another possibility of path, in fact there is only one possibility in this particular network. So what we can do here is that if you look at this carefully, total number of path should be equal to that AIK, that is in this case A13 has to be 1 and A23 has to be equal to 1. If I am again using 1, 2, 3 to denote A, B, C respectively for ease of notations, we see that if both of these equal to 1, and if I can find as many pairs, that would give me the number of shortest path of length 2 between node I and J, and in this case I would be equal to 1, J would be equal to 3, and I'm interested in path of length 2. So that's where in this case A13 is equal to 1, A23 equal to 1, and summation of 1 times 1 would be 1. That means between 1 and 3 I can find only one path of length equal to 2. One interesting thing, if you notice here, aik times akj in fact is a matrix multiplication. That means if we have to find path of length 2 between pair of nodes ij, it can simply be found out by taking an adjacency matrix, taking its square, and identifying what is the number at that particular ijth position. And if that is equal to 1, that means there is one shortest path. If that is equal to 3, that means there are three shortest path of length 2 in that case. Now you can extend the same analogy to path of length n, and we say that number of shortest path of length n between a pair of nodes I and j can be computed using a to the power n between a pair of I and j. Now you can clearly see that I have been saying that we would be dealing with matrix of size of 1 million, because if there are 1 million nodes in a system, we are done. Taking square or higher order powers of matrix is going to be computationally challenging, and hence this number of path method is very robust but mathematically inefficient. And that's where we would use some other techniques, what we call as breadth first search. What we do in breadth first search is that we start from any random node. So let me delete these nodes here. We will select one particular node, and from there we will move in outward direction. That is, identify all the nodes that are within one network distance from node 0, and we will assign a number equal to 1. So all these nodes will get a label equal to 1. That would mean that all these nodes are within one network distance from the node I from where we have started. Similarly, from I to 2, what we would do, we will stand at the new 1 and we will identify what are the neighbors of these nodes 1. Node 2, from 2 we will stand and identify all the nodes that are neighbor of these two, and in both directions we will keep on doing it, and in no time we would reach the terminal of graph, and we say that, and we have identified all the nodes which are at distance 4, distance 3 and distance 2. So this is highlighted in different color and this is in different color. Similarly, all these nodes are in distance 2, these are in distance 3 and these are in distance 4. So very quickly we can identify that what is the distance of each node from a given node or the ith node using breadth first search algorithm. So what I have shown here, again just taking a quick recap: mark all the nodes in number 1, standard 1, mark all the neighbors of 1 as 2's, standard 2's, mark all the neighbor of 2's as 3's, and similarly here these would be equal to 3 here, and then finally standard 3 and mark all the nodes of 3 at 4, and this gives us the breadth of the network from a given node or given central point. This breadth first search algorithm also finds its application when we have to find the connectedness, whether our network is connected or it is fragmented into number of different components that are not interacting with each other, which again we will discuss when we go to connectedness. Now this brings us to another important measure of topology, since as I mentioned, pathology is very important when we have to characterize certain graphs. We call something called as average path length. So average path length is defined as summation of total distance between all pairs of I and j's where I is not equal to j. So in this graph we will compute what is the shortest path or net or path length between all the pairs, between these pairs, this pair, similarly this pair, and how many pairs you can find of all these nodes, and we will sum it together and divided it by total number of maximum edges that can be present in a network, which is n into n minus 1 by 2. And there would be a factor of 2 in denominator when we are talking about undirected graphs, because we do not want to count certain paths twice, because we would be summating over all ij's. That is, we would be saying d12 plus d21 and so on, and the distance between 1 and 2 would be same as distance between 2 and 1 in case of undirected graph or undirected network. And hence, if we do not divide by 2, we would be double counting these terms in this summation, and hence we divide by 2, and this offers great mathematical convenience. Another way you can do that, you can only take I greater than j, and you would not be double counting it, and in that case there is no need to divide it by 2. But I find this particular form as mathematically more convenient when it comes to computation of average path length in a network. Now, there is a sort of a small question for you. You don't have to submit it in form of an assignment, but give it a thought. What do you expect that a network with node number of 200,000 and number of edges of order 10 to the power 6, what would be the average path length in that network? Should it be a few hundred or few thousands or 10,000? So think about it, and I can assure you that whatever you are thinking, that is most likely not a correct direction, because this numbers comes out to be surprisingly small, and we will talk about small world properties of real world network in subsequent chapters. Now, coming to the final concept when it comes to distances is the network diameter. Again, consider this network where you have node A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And if somebody asks you, what is the largest network distance along the shortest path? That is, you have to reach from one pair to the farthest node along the shortest path. How many edges you have to cross to do that would be called as network diameter. That means from A to G or A to E, you can take this as a shortest path to reach there, and you can say that I have to cross 1, 2, 3, 4 number of edges, and hence diameter in this case is equal to 4. And when you check at all the pairs of these nodes, you would find that indeed there is no other path which is longer than length equal to 4. And mind it, we are measuring this length not in terms of the geographical or geometrical distance between two nodes, but how many edges we have to traverse if we have to go from point A to point G or any other farther point. So if I add, let us say, another point H here, that means network diameter would be extended by 1. And also there is a possibility that I add one more link here, I, J, and I do some connection like that. Now I can also go from A to G taking the path shown in orange, that is A to B, B to C, C to D, D to I to J, and J to G. But this would not be considered as network diameter, because still the I can reach from A to G by taking a shortest path. So network diameter in this case would still remain 4 and not 6, and that is something you have to be very mindful of, that network diameter is number of edges you have to cross along the shortest path. Okay, so for sake of completion, let us go back to our history from where we started this chapter, where we were talking about Eulerian path and how Euler discovered that the bridges of Königsberg cannot be traversed without stepping on a given bridge twice. So we define something called as Eulerian path, that is the path in which you cross all the links or edges in a graph or network exactly once. We say that as an Eulerian path. Now in this network where we have 5 nodes, or we can go from we can find a path that crosses all the edges or links exactly once, and we call that this path indeed is Eulerian path. And you can see that here all nodes but two have even degrees and two nodes have odd degrees, again confirming the fact that if a network has more than two odd degree nodes, it would be impossible to find an Eulerian path in that. Along the lines of Eulerian path, we also define something called as Hamiltonian path. In Hamiltonian path, we would cross each edge, each node exactly once. So let us consider this network, again the same network, and we are supposed to find the Hamiltonian path in this network. So what we can do, we can start from this node, go to this node, from here to here, here to here, here to here, but we would not come back because we have already crossed this particular node while going from A to C. So we say that this is one Hamiltonian path. There exists another Hamiltonian path that you start from here, go here, or in fact you start from here, come here, and keep on going in this way, and you never come back, because then it would become an Eulerian path. So you have to terminate at node C, and this orange is another Hamiltonian path that we are present. And finally, we also define something called as cycle. That is, if you start from the same node, keep on going in the continuous manner, and end at the same node, we say that this particular network or graph has a cycle present in it. Now with this, we will close our discussion on network path, and in next video, I will talk about network connectedness, clustering coefficient, both local and global. And this is sort of a crash course in graph theory, and we will borrow these concepts from graph theory and we will apply to study the fascinating world of network science. Thank you.